Hey, ArtistWorks Jazz Piano students and beyond. Hope everybody had a good Thanksgiving. It's December 1st, and today we're going to do a lesson, just kind of a little clinic, on the idea of playing an entire solo across either a pop song or a jazz standard with just one scale. It's a lot more doable than you might think. Typically when people come to me and they've got a tune that they need to play a solo on, I like to start out with what's the lowest common denominator. What's the best way we can get through it without learning a whole bunch of different scales and having a different approach for every chord and so forth. And I've done this example probably 40 times. I'm getting close to having done 1,000 video exchanges at this point. I think I'm at 800 and something. And I find myself doing this demonstration often, so I thought I would do it kind of for everybody. What we're going to do is we're going to play a solo on Billy Joel's New York State of Mind. Beautiful changes, beautiful song. And you would be surprised, we can't really do the bridge with just the one scale, but we can do the whole A section and sound like we really know what we're doing with just one scale. Then we're going to take the same scale and we're going to play a jazz standard called All of Me with it. And this is something I hadn't really tried this until my son Ryan, who was in his high school jazz band, came home and said, you know, I've got to play a solo on 32 bars of All of Me, and I don't really know what to do. So, as I always do, I tried to kind of find first the simplest way to get through it sounding good. And from there we can expand and add a little bit more vocabulary to it. And you know, eventually you get where you're navigating every chord with something that's really great specific to that chord. But it's amazing how much you can kind of, as I like to say, play the key of the song rather than necessarily navigate each chord with something specialized to that chord. I think you'll recognize the sound of this. Even great piano players like Oscar Peterson, Wynton Kelly, Gene Harris, one of my favorite piano players that you may never have heard of, often did this. And it's kind of a way of playing the blues across a tune, but we're not going to use the blues scale of the key of the tune. What we're going to do instead is use the blues scale of the natural sixth of the key. So on All of Me, we're going to play, or rather, let's start with New York State of Mind. Sounds like a lot of changes, right? Can we really navigate that whole thing with just one scale? And the truth is, yes, we sure can, but we're not going to use a B-flat blues scale. You know, I'm playing it in B-flat. I don't even know what the original key is, but when I play solo piano gigs, I play it in B-flat for some reason. It also is the key that we're going to play All of Me in. What we're going to use on it is a G blues scale. Like that sort of thing. And it lets you sort of play idiomatic blues licks, which give you, you know, not a clinically correct jazz thing on it, but definitely something kind of starting to tilt into maybe a little bit of Professor Longhair and Dr. John, and it's just those 6 notes: G, B flat, C, D flat, D, and F. Kind of a 6-note scale, which is convenient because it gives you a certain sort of symmetry when you play up the scale. The same notes end up on the beat as you play. But let's have a little listen to this thing. I'm going to play some. There's going to be a transcription attached to this video so you can see, and I'm going to try to play nothing but the notes of that 6-note blues scale. That's not a bad pass through a couple choruses of the A section of that song using just one scale. I really did restrict myself to just those notes. I've got my grease going, some grace notes going into things and so forth. But the melody of it was all restricted to just those 6 notes. What we're doing in this case is we're playing, as I like to say, the key of the song, rather than navigating each change with something different. If you want to hear that done to perfection, it's Phil Wood's solo on Just the Way You Are, which Phil manages to play right in between kind of a pop solo, but beautiful jazz in there as well, that's more informed by the kinds of things that we talk about in our lessons at ArtistWorks, that being the bop scales and some approach patterns and things like that. This one, it's almost like there's not really any wrong notes. You know, I kind of know my way around these scales well enough to know that if I have a C, the F isn't a great note to play of my G blues scale on that. So I avoid it a little bit. Again, if you play the bop scales, those 8-note jazz scales, those keep you from doing that, at least from not putting it on the beat where the clash is most obvious. So yeah, you can definitely do that. You can hear that it's kind of playing the blues, which is great. Everybody loves that. It's super appropriate for a pop gig especially. But let's see what happens if we play All of Me in there. And on this one, there's a lot more kind of changes. They're actually sort of similar, but it's a jazz feel. It's a standard. The changes are slightly different. And let's see what happens, you know, when I sat down to show my son Ryan what we could do with this thing without, you know, spending the next month figuring out how to navigate each tune, each chord of the tune with the correct scale. It was pretty obvious how far you could get just looking at it as we're going to play the blues on this standard, but we're not going to play a B-flat blues scale, even though the tune is in B-flat. Once again, we're going to use that G blues scale, which has like a very bluesy quality to it, but there's too much minor information in the B flat blues scale, but a G blues scale kind of works out perfectly. It's basically a B flat major pentatonic scale with that additional blue note in it, that being the D flat. So, a lot of the same licks that I would play if I was playing a G blues, I'll play on this standard. And you'll recognize some of it as stuff that you've probably heard one of the great jazz piano players play, particularly early in the solo, when they're sort of starting out with some sort of blues ideas, and then they're going to expand on the harmony as it goes. So let's take a listen to this and see how far we get playing All of Me with just a G blues scale. All of Me in the key of B flat with just a G blues scale. Again, that's pretty cool for just one scale. And since we are really only focused, typically if we were doing a tune like this, as we get more into the detail of it, we would play. Which is sort of bop scales, a different one for each chord of the tune, a little bit of those approach patterns in there, which are such an important part of the vocabulary of jazz. For example, that's a line comprised solely of approach patterns. Each one of those little three-note things that lands on a chord tone is an approach pattern. And once you kind of get yourself familiar with the four of them, I played each of the four of them in that line, when you start to transcribe jazz lines, a lot of that stuff that you couldn't figure out, like what's the theory here, suddenly it becomes super obvious. If you listen to something like The Eternal Triangle, which is that brilliant saxophone battle between Sonny Stitt and Sonny Rollins on that Dizzy Gillespie record of the same name, you hear all three of them, but particularly Sonny Stitt, long lines full of approach patterns. They take you a little bit out of the harmony and then snap you back into the harmony. And I used to analyze stuff and why is that B in there? Why? The first part of Donna Lee, what's that E doing in there? There's the chord. What sense does that make? That's a bop scale right there in the head of that tune. But to get us going, if we're working with just the one scale, that lets us focus in a little bit more on where is our time at. Are we articulating the way that we like to, which is generally pushing the off beats, not, there's something about that always sounds like sort of a beer hall polka band or something if we accent on the beats. And then, we try to lay back behind the beat, like the notes we're playing are just kind of too heavy to be lighter than air and charging along in front of the beat. One of the first things that we learn to recognize when we're listening to piano players, and it's like, well, who is that? Is where they are in relation to the beat. Super easy to find Wynton Kelly, for example, because he is consistently way behind the beat. Within 2 notes, I know it's Dexter Gordon, because he has a very specific way of swinging, and he's way behind the beat in this way. Oscar Peterson often plays a little bit more forward, and it gives his playing that certain sort of energy that's just mind-boggling in its own way. Oscar could just swing his butt off, as we all know, but the time is in a slightly different place. If you listen to Bill Evans, Herbie Hancock is a classic. Keith Jarrett has a very specific shape and dynamic to his lines, and where he puts the notes in time as well is instantly identifiable when he's playing on a standard. So that's a way to do this. You might try that out. I'm going to print some PDFs of the solo on All of Me, and you can take a look at it and sort of see how I navigated that. I'll put the chord changes in there as well. And I think you'll find that it's a great way to kind of dip your fingers into something, get started, play a solo that sounds as good as your touch and your time, which is something that I'm a harpy on in my ArtistWorks course. And yeah, you can actually play a real nice one. As we get into the ArtistWorks course, we have something that I call the quick start lessons, which is playing a C blues. Same idea. We're going to play across the whole thing, even the 5 chord, with just a C minor pentatonic scale. And the point of that is to get everybody sort of up on the horse with just a little collection of 5 notes that are easy to finger, so we can start to dwell in on how the articulation feels, this. Versus the difference being that on the first one, I'm 1, 2, 3, 4, pushing the notes, accenting the notes between the beats. Second one, I'm kind of hyping the corniness of accenting the notes on the beats. But same idea, we're going to play a whole tune with one scale, a blues form. But then as we get into playing our first standard, we're going to play Autumn Leaves, which is a tune that's easy to navigate with just 2 bebop scales. And from there, we start adding in a little bit of the approach patterns and so forth. But again, the approach is always, let's get it going, get it sounding good, get it feeling good where we're having fun, and then we'll add to the vocabulary from there. So however you do the holidays, have a great one, and I'll see you for your first video exchange if you're not already a student.